remember May of 1999 because that was the month when Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came out. And as a Star Wars fan, I could speak for everybody else who was a Star Wars fan at the time. I was so excited. We were so excited. A whole group of us bought tickets in advance, and we went to Movieland. It's now called the Alamo Drafthouse out in Yonkers. But it was Movieland back then up in Yonkers, and we went and we had a great time. And I loved the movie at first watch. But even as I was watching it, I knew there was something up. Now, even though Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, got a lot of slack and, of course, Jar Jar and all that nonsense. It's been almost 20 years since Episode 1 came out. And I like to talk about, actually, reasons why I do, in fact, like Star Wars Episode 1. The first reason that I like Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was because we got a chance to take a look at the Republic for the first time. Okay? I mean, before that, it was just mentioned in passing in Episode 4, in the very first film, by Grand Moff Tarkin, when he said that the remnants of the old Republic had been swept away. And we always, and we heard about it from Obi-Wan Kenobi as well, when he was talking to Luke about the history of the Jedi. It was always a thing in our heads as Star Wars fans as to, I wonder what that was like. I wonder what that must have been like, living in that time period before all of this other stuff happened in Episodes 4, 5, and 6. Well, we had an opportunity to see that early on in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It gave us our first glimpse of the Republic, of the Senate, of Coruscant, because Coruscant turned out to be the main capital of the galaxy. And that's something that was pulled out of the extended universe novels that were released well after Return of the Jedi came out in 1983. And George Lucas implemented that planet into the canon moving forward with the prequels. So I thought that was a pretty good way of learning how the Republic operated and the corruption within the Senate, which also gave a leeway to another reason why I liked Star Wars Episode 1. Another reason why, and this would be number 2, the second reason I liked Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was because we start learning about the Sith. Now, you know what's funny about the Sith? I'm going to tell you something about the Sith. Before Star Wars Episode 1, it was just kind of like a title. As a matter of fact, if you think about it for real, you don't even hear that Sith title. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I've seen, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi like a million times since they were released. And I'm 49 right now, and I'm still trying to find the word Sith in that, in those movies. Not one. However, Darth Vader, his title, when the first Star Wars movie was released in 1977, I remember in the description of him in the back of toys, playing cards, collector's cards, cereal boxes, things of that nature, it would say Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. Nobody knew what that was. So it wasn't until after, somewhere in between the last film, Return of the Jedi, and Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, as implemented into the extended universe novels, we started getting a bit more of an inkling of what the Sith were, but it wasn't until Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came in when Qui-Gon Jinn revealed to the Jedi Council that he suspected he came across a Sith Lord. He was talking about Darth Maul when he first encountered him on Tatooine. That was huge. That was a big thing back then, because if you think about it, it really became the segue to the other two films in the prequel trilogy, as well as the expanded universe novels. The Sith became synonymous with the Jedi. They both went mano a mano, and we learned a great deal about their history, their philosophy, their dark side arts, and the whole thing about the rule of two, which was established by Darth Bane 1,000 years beforehand. One master, one apprentice. One to have the power, the other to crave it. And the idea would be that the apprentice, when he feels he's surpassed the master, he will kill the master off, and again he will become the new master, and then he will collect himself another apprentice. They will lay in hiding for 1,000 years until the time was right to emerge and take over the galaxy, which is pretty much what happened in Revenge of the Sith, in the third film of the prequel trilogy. So that's another reason why I liked Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, because it brought in the whole idea of the Sith and the title Darth. Like, until I heard the name Darth Sidious, I only thought that Darth Vader, that was his name. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, Darth was just another a name. Apparently, it's tied into the Sith title. I didn't know that until Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The third reason I liked Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace was we watched Palpatine's rise to power. Now, in the original trilogy, we didn't even know Palpatine was his name yet at a certain point. It was just the Emperor. He's mentioned in passing in the first film by Grand Moff Tarkin. You actually see him for the first time in The Empire Strikes Back. Of course, it wasn't Ian McDiarmid yet. It was some other dude, and it looked a little different. And then when they brought in Ian McDiarmid to play the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, it was like that was the solidified look. That was it. Okay, here he is, you know. And it was great that they brought him back to do the prequel films, you know, so we could reprise that role, so we could see how he rose to power. Like, I knew how he did it. I just wanted to see on screen him doing it. So when he finally did it, that was great. Fourth reason I liked Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We see the Jedi Temple and the whole center of the Jedi and what they're about. You saw that they were a very organized religion. They were a very organized lot. The Jedi were in charge of being the defenders of peace and justice in the Republic. In spite of the corruption, which they were aware of, they wanted to keep the peace. And I thought that was a great way to kind of like bring in what the philosophy of the Jedi was. Little did we know later on in the films, especially going into the other two films, how compromising that was to Anakin Skywalker's, because there were obviously some disagreements. Him and Obi-Wan were always going at it. And then finally that kind of like spilled over in Revenge of the Sith. The fifth reason I liked Star Wars The Phantom Menace, and I mentioned this already real quick, was that we see Coruscant for the first time. Like I said, Coruscant was part of the Expanded Universe novels, and George Lucas implemented that planet into the prequel trilogy, making it canon. And I thought it was great. We loved Coruscant. As a matter of fact, if you watch the end of Return of the Jedi, the revised edition with the extra footage and the extra CGI that they added, if you watch that, at the very end, when you see the galaxy celebrating basically the defeat of the Empire after the second Death Star was destroyed, you see a glimpse of Coruscant. You see a glimpse of Coruscant and them tearing down the statue of Emperor Palpatine, and people cheering that on. All right, number 6 reason why I liked Star Wars The Phantom Menace, and this is the reason why a lot of people liked it. This is probably the best reason. We watched an awesome lightsaber battle. Holy God. Like, when we saw Darth Maul with that double-bladed lightsaber go at it against Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, didn't you lose your mind? I know I did. That was so awesome. Now, admittingly, to this day, I just watched that part. You know, sometimes I even look it up on YouTube and I'd be like, well, I just want to see that. And I see it because that is really just an amazing choreographed lightsaber fight that was just unimagined up until that point. You never saw anything like that in the original trilogy films. You know, when Vader and Obi-Wan fought, it was like clash, clash, clash. When Luke and Vader fought, it was it was mad cool. I loved it. Everybody, I still enjoy watching it. The Return of the Jedi lightsaber fight, not so much. It was all right. You know, there was a lot of the conflict within you. You know, there was a lot of talking in there, a lot more than it was in the other two. But this one, amazing. And it was great that they had Ray Park as Darth Maul. He is an expert martial artist, so his moves in there were like phenomenal, and it really added to the authenticity and the choreography and the coolness of a good lightsaber fight. Number 7, the reason I like Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, Darth Maul. Darth Maul was amazing. Again, like I stated, Ray Park was amazing. The way he moved, he didn't talk much, but it was a lot, and it's an amazing, mysterious character. You learn more about him in novels and moving forward. Like you learn about his background, how he grew up, how Palpatine found him, how he trained him. So there's a lot of background there where it leads up to when you see the other stories regarding him in both the animated series, The Clone Wars, and Star Wars Rebels. The 8th reason why I like Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was we learned about Luke and Leia's mom. That was always a mystery, wasn't it? Right? Like, wow, if Darth Vader is their father, who the heck was his mother? There was some allusions to it in the in some of the expanded universe books about who his mother may have been. It was Luke looking. I remember reading a novel once where Luke went to search for who his mother was, and there was like a kind of like a search there. I mean, Luke asked Leia in Return of the Jedi, "Do you remember your mother?" And she's like, "She died when I was very young." And I'm like, "Well, boy, you were really young because you were just born at that moment when she died." So it's kind of like weird there. I'm wondering how they try to like really, tighten that and connect that, but we'll see. The 10th reason why I liked the Clone Wars was because George Lucas returned as director. If you think about it, he only directed the first film, right, which blew away the box office. It was a movie ahead of its time. It ushered in, a new world of sci-fi and fantasy that until then was only still like in people's heads, and he was able to get away with it. He was able to really pull it through. George Lucas is a genius. Okay, now say what you will about how a lot of people didn't like how he directed The Phantom Menace, how he directed the Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Okay, given all that, you still have to admit, look, he's the creator. He was the inventor. He could do whatever the hell he wants with it, which, considering the recent turn of events in our current age of 2018, it's pretty much missed and appreciated in my book. Nonetheless, George Lucas made his return to direct those 3 films, not just Phantom Menace, but Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith as well. And even though he sold all of his properties of Lucasfilm to Disney, and now that Kathleen Kennedy has kind of taken on the helm of owning the whole thing, nonetheless, you still learn to appreciate what we did have as Star Wars fans, what we will continue to appreciate as Star Wars fans, and what we're going to hopefully moving forward. It's been a tough year. You know what I speak of. Let's move forward with this enthusiasm as Star Wars fans to better stories, better and exciting lightsaber battles. It makes me think one day I'm going to be dead and buried, and this Star Wars stories will continue on for the new generations to come. It's going to suck that I won't be here for that, but it's kind of comforting to know that such an amazing imaginary story is such an expansion of imagination that we'll all appreciate and learn to appreciate in spite of the setbacks. This is Ralph Perez from Strange Planet. Take care.